Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our online roundtable. My name is Bernard Sabiti, and everyone that has joined us, thank you so very much for joining us. Basically, as you saw in the invitation, we are really trying to understand the dynamics around some of the interventions that the government is taking to address the issues, the serious social issues that are being brought about by COVID-19. We realized that the issue of the role of data and evidence was lacking in a lot of the conversations that were going on. So this was basically the reason we thought we needed to talk about this. So I'm called Bernard Sabiti, and I'm here in Kampala. I know some of you are in different places, so this is the new reality we are dealing with. Thank you for joining us. And sorry for being so disheveled. You know, you can't visit a salon or a barber shop now. If you are clean shaven, you probably have broken the law, as you know. But it's really good to see that many of you have joined us already. I think, James, maybe should we start right now or should we wait a little bit? James is my colleague who is helping me handle the IT issues of this discussion. James, do we have a quorum already? Should we kick off?
Absolutely. We've got around 30 people in the meeting, and I can continue to let people in as they join.
Excellent. So just for the sake of those who may really not know much about development initiatives or DI, I will take a minute just to introduce about who we are and what exactly we do and why we decided to convene this very important discussion. So we are basically an organization that focuses on, data-driven, promoting data-driven decision-making for poverty reduction. And our vision, we really want to see where everyone shares in the benefit of opportunity and growth. You know, they leave no one behind the agenda. Those who have heard of it, this is really who we are about. So we basically have a very simple theory of change. We believe that if allocation of resources by governments are rooted in good data and good evidence, then there are chances that they will have more impact in terms of targeting those that are most in need. And I think this really makes it very relevant in terms of what we are talking about today. We know that the government is really trying hard to make sure that even in a country that has so much poverty, when you face a crisis like the one we are facing, you can be able to target these resources to make sure that they reach those that are most in need. The question, I think, is how do you do that? How do you do that, especially in a context where almost everyone can credibly claim to be vulnerable? And this is where the role of data and evidence comes in. So some of the things that we work on in Uganda, we are really big advocates for easier access to data. And we try to make sure that the data that exists in Uganda is as simple as possible for people to use. As you can see, one of our projects here is called a Spotlight. This is where we simplify data by district and even lower levels, trying to make it simple for those that don't have the opportunity to go to these basic, raw data analytics, to kind of remove that gap for them to access this data in a very easy to use formats. So we try to organize the data and also enable comparisons across sectors and across geographical regions. So we have worked on data on a number of thematic areas in this country. And when you go to our website, you'll find some data sets very easy to download on several of those sectors. We also do what we call data landscaping. This is where we basically look at the national data landscape, like the one for Uganda, and we try to understand all the major players within Uganda when it comes to data and statistics. We identify the challenges around data governance, data production, and data use, and we create a picture of how the national statistical system looks like. We also try to make sure that we bring different bits of scattered data and put it in one place so that users can easily access this data at any time that they want. We do also some budget analysis, especially tracking how much spending is going into social sectors or pro-poor sectors, what we call pro-poor sectors. Some of the work we've done here can all be easily found on our website. We also work with the National Statistical System, UBOS, primarily to promote issues of data access and data use. So today's event, basically, having given you that background, we all know that Uganda has been struggling mightily with handling COVID-19. And one of the challenges that has come up has been that even with government trying to really put in place measures, this new variant has really caused the crisis in this country. And the government has come up with an idea of extending social protection, especially to those that are likely to be hit the hardest by some of the containment measures that are being put in place. There has been a lot of debate about how beneficiaries are being selected for this initiative. But actually, when you look at the history, government has always had social programs, especially for vulnerable people, which means in some way government has been targeting some social interventions to certain groups of Ugandans. The Ministry of Gender especially has a number of programs. So we wanted to know exactly, was this initiative, did it follow certain metrics to identify those to benefit from this initiative? And if so, what were those metrics? And even speaking generally in terms of social protection, what should the role of data be? As I had said, in a country that has widespread poverty like Uganda, how do you select the most vulnerable to extend relief? So basically, we thought we would bring a group of people together, the likes of yourselves, and bring some key stakeholders who are involved in these interventions and discuss these, looking at what role can data and statistics play in identifying people for to target certain social interventions. We have today a number of individuals who will be helping us to make sense of this issue. Mr. Paul Onapa is joining us representing the Permanent Secretary from the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development. And Mr. Onapa is the head of the national the Youth Livelihood Program. All of you who might know about this program, it's actually one of those social protection interventions the government has put in place to target certain youth. Even this program itself, I imagine, has some parameters on how they identify beneficiaries. We have Ms. Arana Kembabazi from the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights. She has done research. She really goes down to the ground to see how social programs affect people on the ground. And Arana will help us to understand, is data enough to actually identify those that are most in need? What are the gaps, and what is it that we can do beyond data to actually be able to identify people that should be the target for government social interventions? Along the way from the audience, we will have Mr. Herbert Buyondo, who will also talk a little bit about For example, what UBOS has done, by the way, beyond the surveys, UBOS also does some other routine local-based data collection. And one of the interesting programs they have is the community information system. How can this community level data collection actually contribute to the evidence pool that we need to make sure that we increase the best targeting of resources which are very, very inadequate, by making sure that we actually reach the most vulnerable. Lastly, we will have Mr. Wilbrod Ntawiha, who is a very big enthusiast of big data. These are big data sets, mostly enabled by technology to try to address certain social programs. If you remember, when this intervention was first announced, the Prime Minister said they are going to use mobile money data transactions to identify who is most vulnerable. And a lot of people laughed her off, but actually what she was saying was not crazy. As the world advances in technology, there is an increase in use of these huge data sets, sometimes held by private companies, to try to tell a certain story about the socioeconomic conditions of poor people and of people in general. So he will tell us, how can these data, especially in instances where you don't have reliable and consistent official statistics, can these technologically oriented and enabled data sets actually help in trying to support policymakers to make certain key decisions? So right now, I think I will not waste a lot of time. I will go straight to Mr. Paul Onapa from the Minister of Gender, Labor and Social Development, whom I'm sure is listening and is with us, to tell us exactly about this COVID relief intervention. How did it come about? What was the evidence that actually helped the ministry and the government in general to think about it, and what data have they used to actually make sure that this help goes to the right people? Mr. Onapa, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ndugu Bernard, and my regards to all of you and my fellow panelists on this meeting for today. I'm very excited to represent the Ministry of Gender, but also to share about the COVID relief cash grant, which we are giving to vulnerable persons. Moderator, in the context of the discussion and the paper that I got, I would love to first start by saying that the cash relief which is being provided by government of Uganda is emanating from the directive of the president issued on the 18th during his national address that indicated that the ministry should identify those vulnerable persons who depended on daily earning to be supported within the 42-day period of the lockdown. Now, when you already talk about the people that depend on daily earning, you have moved away from the traditional definition of vulnerability. So in that case, we then narrowed down to identify these people that depended on daily earning. And these are people who are earning something, but because of the lockdown containment measures, would have their livelihoods threatened. So that was the first departing point from the definition of vulnerability, which also speaks to the issue now that vulnerability is a moving concept. It is not one that is static, that you'll have older persons, persons with disabilities, women facing domestic violence as categories. No, vulnerability can be defined by need. And that is how we arrived at those lists that you have been seeing making rounds of the people in the bars, the taxi owners and taxi conductors, the baggage carriers, the wheelbarrow pushers, because these are people who are earning a daily income and would have their livelihoods threatened. So that is the first. The list is extensive. We have seen that list, and then we will not be able to go to that. Then the second was, how then are we going to target those people? Where are we going to get the data? For example, the wheelbarrow pushers, for example, the taxi conductors, the baggage carriers, where are we going to get the data? The first to note is targeting used occupational targeting methodology, in which case, because the occupations are identified and are known, borders, for example, are known, they have stages, taxi conductors are known or touts through their various stages. The people in the creative industry, the artists, the people in the bars, they are all known. So we use the first is occupational targeting to identify these people. Now, occupational targeting relied on administrative data, which was in the possession of the town clerks. Maybe to notice the coverage is Kampala Metropolitan, which covers Kampala, Wakiso, and Mukono, all cities of Uganda, which are 12 cities, and then the municipalities, which are 29. That is the coverage. Yes, we are aware that the same challenges of the lockdown or COVID are faced by other places in the town councils, but for now, that was the limitation that we were given. So once we got occupation targeting, the records, we use administrative records in the possession of the town clerks. And these town clerks, during the first lockdown, made registration of some of these people that had been affected. Now, that was our first point of call. But we are aware that they didn't have all this information. For example, where would they have gotten wheelbarrow pushers? Where would they have gotten waitresses? Okay. So we also conducted fresh data collection. That is again using the local government structures, the town clerks, and below the town clerks, he has a team or she has a team. Could be ward administrators, VHTs, community development officers, and also with the ISO, the security agents. So we also did fresh data collection to arrive at the beneficiaries and the total target that we intended. But we also did not completely throw away the food distribution lists that were used in the first lockdown by the Office of the Prime Minister. We recall that Office of the Prime Minister did distribute food to the vulnerable persons around Kampala and the major cities. So that list was also one point of call. Of course, there is the argument of, yes, these lists had to be verified, and that's why you saw in some areas, I think it was Namungo now, when they placed the list, there were a bit of public outcry. Yeah, that is right. So we verified that list and then used it as a starting point. Now, in terms of ensuring that it's the rightful people that actually get the money, the ministry put in place a number of checks. First is, we are not selecting everybody in the household. We are aware that on average, a household has 4.5 people, but for purposes of equity, it is one person per household. And the one person per household means that if a household is registered, maybe the husband is a tout, okay? Then if there are any other people in the household that qualify, then it is only one telephone number that is registered for purpose of ensuring equity. Two, the registration process was aimed to be a very transparent process. Upon registration, the lists had to be displayed within the local areas of the various villages where the lists were being generated. And this was being done for purposes of verification and update of the register. It helps when you verify, when you place the registers in public places, then people can come and contest, or people can come and verify those that in one way or the other could have maybe been missed out or erroneously included on the list. But also we are aware that there are protocols that determine data verification and display. There is the Data Protection Act, which indicates the amount of details that you must put when you're displaying person's data. For example, you cannot display their NIN, you can't display their age, you can't display a couple of things, but we did comply on that. But we also put in place an online system. To working with NITA Uganda, we put in place an online system where the town clerks enter the data onto the system, and the system is verified to weed out, number one, duplicate names. Number two, names that don't match the names. But also number three, people who want to double dip. Now, all these measures are put in place to ensure that the process is, one, is transparent, but also two, that we reduce as much as we can errors, especially at inclusion level. And so in that case, only one person can benefit because it's only one name that is registered, not more than one. But also two is that those that have corresponding, those whose names are vulnerable, have been identified, but maybe don't have a telephone number or NIN, are going to be paid through a voucher system and through the post bank. Now, of course, this process hasn't been very, very smooth. There are challenges. And the first, of course, is that there are many people who are not registered. They don't have NIN numbers. Okay? There are those that have NIN numbers, but don't have telephones. There are those that have telephones, but the NIN numbers are not in their names. There are those that have telephones that are not registered on mobile money. There are those that have telephones, but when you put them in the system with the telecoms, they indicate the numbers are not registered at all. So all these are challenges when you're dealing with mobile money transactions that we have encountered. But the good thing is we're working as a team with the telecoms, Airtel, MTN, Postbank, Nita Uganda, to ensure that these are addressed and they'll be paid through a separate system of the platform. But a question would come and say, okay, wasn't there any data that we could have used to start with? Because this discussion is about data. There is a lot of data in this country. However, some of this data has a lot of limitations. We did a data mapping of data that we could have used to target. The first is UBOS has a census of business establishments, and this was done in 2020. Okay, now this census of business establishment captures the business establishments by country, I mean by name, nature of business, location, number of workers. What it doesn't do is to, one, capture the specifics of the workers. Because we are now looking NIN as a reference number, it doesn't capture that. It doesn't capture the telephones. But also, two, it captures the business owner, not necessarily the employees. Okay, and that's where the vulnerability might be. It may not even be with the owner, because we know, for example, most of businesses are owned by people in offices, either workers in government, in NGOs, in private sector, and the vulnerable people are the ones that are the workers, and these are not captured by that. But also, this happened before COVID, so a lot of things would have changed. The second one is the population and housing census. Now, this was conducted in 2014. While this one captures household characteristics, what it doesn't do is to detail the individual characteristics vis-a-vis the occupation that we are seeking to target. So that means that, in essence, it gives us limitations from the word go. But also the details that we are seeking to capture, the telephone, the NIN numbers, are not in the population census database. Then the second is, in KCCA, there have been some inroads. They have the trade license register, which was captured in 2019. And the trade license register captures business categories that pay trade licenses. And these are disaggregated by parish and village and location. If you went to that register, you'll be able to see in Nakao, for example, what businesses are registered to pay trade licenses. But the limitation of that data is, number one, again, it also only registers the business owner. It doesn't register the vulnerable persons that would have been used. But number two, most businesses are very informal. Actually, they have never registered to even because they fear paying taxes. So if you go by the trade license register alone, then you're going to miss out on the category that you should be targeting. But also, three, is that the register, relying on the business owners alone, will be misleading because a lot of the businesses are family owned. So if you go to the register and say, give me your employees, you're going to end up with the same family members, because you find it is the husband, the wife is the manager, the firstborn is the sales manager, and that's how it goes. So that register has complexities as well. Then, of course, you have the private schools register, which is available. Now, this provided a little bit of more accurate information that we actually use for private teachers, because this gives us details of the teachers and non-teaching staff by private school. So we only added some details on the NIN to be able to get that. Of course, there is also the commercial road users register. Again, this is under KCCA, which captures the details of particularly the borders and the taxi owners. What it doesn't do, again, is that you find one border has 4 riders, one in the morning, another in the afternoon, another in the evening, and another in the night. Now it captures one. Okay, the same with the taxi. You find the driver of the taxi is different. When he goes to take it, it's another person that picks it up. Again, in the evening, the Chivalua people. So in essence, you end up missing out again on the people that you would really love. So if you look at that, it tells us a couple of things, that yes, there is some data which is available. However, a lot of it is scattered. It lacks a lot of information. And that's why, building on the administrative data that was in the possession of the town clerks, we started the process and verified and built it upwards to be able to get the people that we're talking about. Of course, we have the Social Protection Single Registry at the Ministry, which also gives us a clear capture of some of the beneficiaries, but also limits to the beneficiaries within the social protection programs. So it means that it will not, for example, capture if you're outside NOSAF, if you're outside disability grant, or the others. But a couple of lessons with which we learned. Number one, as I noted, that targeting will always be very difficult unless you're using universal targeting. Because now that one is the easiest. You just say all older persons or children, that would be easy. But the moment you use means tested or means proxy targeting methodologies, such as occupational targeting, you'll certainly have problems, especially in Uganda, where a lot of the businesses are very informal. And then the attempts to register are also not harmonized, especially with the other agencies. But also, it's also very important that we also talk about the issue of the why the cash. Yes, the last time we gave food, you see, social protection can be either in cash or in kind. Now, the last time, the method was in kind, which was food and other essential commodities. But this time, we said, okay, can we try a different method, which is cash? And the reason you use cash, because of the various advantages of cash. One, we are in a pandemic. You want to avoid as much as possible people gathering as one of the ways of reducing the spread. But also, two, you realize that when you do food, the process between procurement, delivery, mobilizing logistics, you can actually end up still distributing food even after the pandemic. That's why in the first lockdown, as you saw, people were receiving food 6 months after the distribution had really started. So drawing from those lessons, but also looking at the lessons of one, cash is empowering, okay? When you get cash, you remember, and this is pure on a lighter note, but we're saying a lot of things, that someone is given portion beans, but says, where is the charcoal? Okay, what is the cooking oil? Now, it corners them because you have the portion beans, but you can't cook it. So, but when you have cash, that is why when you give you cash, you'll be able to buy the same portion, you buy the beans, but also be able to afford those other things that may not necessarily have been distributed. But also look at it this way. We are injecting 51 billion shillings into the economy, into those 41 cities and municipalities. If you are to buy portion beans, you're probably injecting it into 1 or 2, 3 people, big dealers. But imagine in Mbale now, you have money injected. These people are going to buy goods from the local economy. Okay, in Kampala, we're injecting close to about almost about 15 billion. Now, all that is here. It's being, these guys are going to go to the shopkeepers, they buy the items. So basically, you stimulate the local economy. That's for cash. But also, another question people have been asking is, why did you take the 100,000? It is not guesswork. There are many approaches. You can use the sphere standard, which gives you the minimum calorie intake a person must take to survive. Okay, but also here we also used what we call the minimal survival expenditure basket calculation, where we arrived at and using the expenses from the first lockdown to say, okay, fine, what did they buy? They bought 10 kilograms of 15 kilograms of portion, 10 kilograms of beans. Now, we also do the same, but allow you to buy yourself, but add for you, one, also be able to buy soap, because COVID is about hygiene. Buy some soap, buy cooking oil, and we'll give you an allowance. So that's how the 10,000 is computed. It is not a figure that maybe we just arrive at it. But so in terms of also sharing with you the progress, our target was reached 501,107. As I speak today, at least we have been able, on the system, we have been able to have an entry of 448,134, which is 89%. So we're almost there. The Prime Minister gave us the deadline of tomorrow, and we can see at 89%, we're almost there. Then in terms of payments, you have been able to pay 205,310 beneficiaries. And that's amounting to about 21 billion. Now, the reason there is a discrepancy, as I told you, some numbers are not synchronized, are not registered, their names, some numbers are not mobile money registered. But with this combing that we're doing with the telecos, and then also the discussion on how we are going to pay them through the voucher, we'll be able to reach our target. And so far, as you can see from the testimonies in the media, a lot of the people are receiving the money, and it is indeed helping them to improve their livelihoods. I'm happy to, at some point, to share, if you want the details by breakdown of the occupation, I'm happy to give you this data for you to look at how the different occupations are faring and the payment. But as I conclude, just to note about three things. One, that moving forward, we have data that is available, but we need to harmonize the data for it to be able to be efficient. I have noted the social protection single registry is a good starting point, but it needs to be supported for it to work. And for it to work, it needs to be supported this way. Number one, we need a social registry. A social registry is basically a mapping of vulnerable persons within the different areas. So far now, there is a social registry that has been created, but only for Karamoja region, and this is by WFP. Now, because the social registry would help us to know, like for example, in this region, who are the poor, by definition of boobos, who are the persons with disabilities, who are the older persons, who are those that are unemployed. Now, that registry is a good starting point, and we really, really need it. The only problem with the social registry or social registries in general, one, they're very, very costly to undertake, but two, they require frequent update because, you know, people migrate, especially urban areas. The rate of migration is so high. Today you are in Kawempe, go next week, you find the person in Nakawa. After 2 weeks, he has gone back to the village. Okay? So because of the high level of migration, social registries also have limitations, but they give a good starting point that we also need to look at. Number two, it's important that we decentralize data collection and update to particularly the parish chiefs. And again, we say this because right now we have launched the parish model, okay? And UBOS is doing very, very well by leading us on the pillar on community data. Now, can we use that inroad of the community data pillar of the parish model to be able to generate information on these vulnerable persons, okay? Either through the social registry and then build it up as a layer within the single registry platform so that we can be able to tap into this. If not, then we need to strengthen decent work. One of the elements of decent work is the right to association, okay? And association means having your associations fully registered. So strengthening registration within the various associations is very, very critical because a lot of the people operating informally, and because they operate informally, they cannot be targeted. But this is also now an opportunity for us to formalize as much as we can our economy so that the people can be registered, but also can be tracked. But also you cannot talk about registration and data without unique identifiers. People need to register for national IDs. Okay, that's the only way data will be authentic. Because without your unique identifier, without a national ID, it will be very difficult for you to be identified in the system. So data on persons also has to be beefed up with registration at NERA for people to have national IDs so that we can be able to, at any one point, to locate you. Even if we tap into the NERA database, we'll be able to pick you up and know exactly how you're faring. But also very, very important is that many programs have management information systems. I'll give an example. Here at the ministry, we have the Social Assistance Grants for Empowerment Management Information System. We have the Disability Management Information System. We have the NUSAF and PRDP Management Information Systems. We have the KCCA Girls for Bride Management Information Systems. We have the pension systems. The NSSF people are here. Now, when we have these systems working very, very well, then we'll be able to get data. And again, such platforms are very good that these systems should be strengthened and supported to be able to be fully operational, to capture data. But also it gets back to, remember the discussion that we've been having for a very, very long time on the role of governments, local governments particularly, within their development plans. So you ask, do local governments really do data collection in developing development plans, or sometimes they just look at figures haphazardly? Now, if local governments have systematic ways of capturing data, it starts there and then moves upwards. So within the context of the time, I did not know the time I was allocated, but I thought I should run through broadly, like that, give the context of the cash grant, and also note that so far the success is very, very high. As a ministry, we're very happy that we've been able to at least achieve what we have. We've been able to demonstrate that there are other methods that can be used in addition to food to be able to reach out to the vulnerable. And there are many lessons that we can learn or that we are learning. And we hope that even in other operations, it will even be much, much smoother. Although for now, with the 89%, I believe we are achieving well. I've seen some comments coming in on the chat. Maybe as a moderator, you'll be able to guide how we take it up. So I want to thank you and stop here for now. Thank you very much.
Fascinating insights, Paul. Thank you so very much. I think maybe before I go to the next speaker, one question that is repeating itself is, so if there are some people already receiving some sort of other social protection, were you able to tell who those were? In this case, wouldn't it be that they are receiving double payment, sort of? How would you able to separate those ones?
Bernard, that is very simple to tell, because when the data comes through the online system, one, it is checked through the social protection single registry. Now,
Yes.
that weeds out, first of all, because the single registry captures beneficiaries of social protection interventions, at least mapped as of now. SAGE, the NOSAF, PRDP, Youth Livelihood Program, and etc. Now, those ones, we're able to see them, and not that they are not eligible, but we say, let's give priority to those that are getting nothing completely. It's not that they're not eligible. They're eligible, but I'm saying for equity purposes, let's first give priority to those that are not getting anything at all. So that's how we're able to weed out and remove at least double beneficiaries from the intervention level of government. Then the second level, now once we have gotten that, then we check it together with the telecos, the MTN and Airtel, to be able to ensure that the records that we have, one, match with the NIN, but also two, that you have not benefited within that online system, because it will detect you. It's one NIN, one interest. That's how we're able to pick out that data. Thank you.
Excellent. Then the other thing, Paul, before I let you go, of course, more questions will come. There was also a question on the justification for prioritizing urban dwellers as opposed to rural dwellers. For some critics, there doesn't seem to be any data-based or evidence-based rationale for that. If you would just take a minute to explain why you thought that urban dwellers were more deserving of this intervention than their rural counterparts.
Thank you. And again, that's an interesting question. It all relates to the coping mechanisms. In urban areas, they are more in the money economy. Everything is cash-based and cash-driven. In the rural areas, it's a bit of an economy which is outside money. In the rural areas, you have your garden, can be able to go get your cassava. You have your beans that have been harvested, so you can be able to afford a meal. In an urban area where there is a lockdown, you're simply done, because you're either coming to the market in Nakasero to pick food to go and put it on the table, but now transport has been stopped, so that means you're going to go hungry. So because of that, our focus was, let's start with the urban areas where the lockdown particularly affects them the most in terms of putting food on the table. Not that vulnerabilities are not in rural areas, but because of resource constraints, we said, let's start with where it bites most. Clearly, you can see even with the lockdown measures, most people run back to the villages. You've been seeing that influx. When they say we are locking down, everybody's like, let me go back to the village. Why? Because they know that in the village, it's easier for you to survive through the lockdown. You have food from the garden. But in an urban area, it's very, very difficult, especially if you don't have cash for yourself or if you don't have resources. That's why the focus was, let's start with the urban areas. And even with the urban areas, the question was, number one, statistics-wise, Kampala Metropolitan is the most populated region of Uganda. So that becomes order number one. Then the second is, okay, how far do we get? Let's go to the cities, the 11 cities, okay? Then also now we say, okay, fine, because Cabinet said at least we should aim to reach out to at least 500,000 households. So we say, okay, let's push it to the next level of the municipalities. If more resources are availed, we shall be able to push it to the town councils and move downward. So as to where we start, Kampala, and end with the municipality is a pure resource issue, okay? Because we are constrained with how much we have. We have only 53 billion for this operation. But in case more money is availed, then we'll be able to reach out to a lot of the people. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. I think, ladies and gentlemen, keep those comments coming in, please. I can see them in the chat. And again, write your name and your, you register your details there for further follow-up. I now wanted to bring in, I don't know if Mr. Buyondo is with us from UBOS. Mr. Buyondo, Paul, towards the end of his presentation, talked about that with the coming of the parish model, that there is even going to be possibility of, using the data the Bureau is generating at that level. If you could take a minute, Herbert, and you tell us exactly what kind of data does UBOS collect at the very local level, at the very last administrative units, and where is that data? How is it collected? How can it be accessed? And how can it be helpful to users, but also to the government for targeting interventions like this?
Thank you, Bennett. Good morning, colleagues. I think I'm audible.
Yes, you are, Herbert. We can hear you loud and clear. Go ahead.
As told, my name is Buyondo Herbert from Uganda Bureau of Statistics. And I'm a principal officer working for the local government statistics. Bernard, the question of parish model vis-a-vis CIS is a hot cake as I talk now. And a lot of efforts have been made to ensure that the parish model, the activities of a parish model are properly informed through the other programs that will be implementing it. For UBOS, we are taking on the 5th pillar on the community information. What is community information? Community information system is a government program that started way back in 2005-06. At that time, it was supposed to inform the programs of the sub-county development of the sub-county. These were development programs that came after the presidential elections, where the manifesto emphasized the implementation or the planning process and implementation to be scaled down up to the sub-county. The weight is now advocated to move from the sub-county to the parish. When you look at those activities at that time, well, we are maintaining almost the similar activities, but with different approaches. At parish level, we are targeting the individuals and also the community and groups within such a part in that parish. For UBOS, we are collecting data to inform those indicators of the other stakeholders who are implementing this, the five pillars. What do we do? Under community information system, we have 3 modules. One is for the community. That one, we call it the general parish information, which involves all the infrastructure that is shared by the community. For example, we have the schools, we have the roads, water, all such infrastructure that are shared. That information is picked from all the parishes in the district where we are. We have also the household tool, where different characteristics of the household together with the individual persons in that household are picked, including the employment and also the categories of such employment. Now, this one is done by we use the existing structures in the districts. We use the local council one chairperson to pick that information from the village. Of course, they are trained and the capacities are built. Initially, we are using questionnaires, which was too expensive. And later on, we moved to the copy device. So for the chairpersons who cannot use such gadgets, we give that chance to him or her to identify a person from that very village, because we want to use people. We use people who understand those villages better. Now, at parish level, where we collect the general purpose data or the general parish data, we use the sub-county, sorry, the parish chief. He compiles that register for the parish level. Now we move up. There are also other variables that are picked from the sub-county that are not necessarily parish specific. These ones are picked by either the sub-county CDO or the sub-county chief. Now, this data is aggregated. This data is aggregated up to the sub-county, up to the district level. And at district level, we get the district specifics or the district indicators. Okay? These ones are transmitted to UBOS to compile not national, because we don't have data for all the districts being collected under CIS, but we just compile them and inform our statistical abstract. But before this data is shared nationally and internationally using our website and also the reports, we first of all validate it with the district community. How do we do it? At village level. First of all, when we collect data, before we leave the village, we leave that data with the village people, especially the chairperson. And they are supposed to pin this information at common places like markets and the churches. Mention it, such that people can see whether exactly what has been compiled is the right information. And we get the feedback at that level. That feedback is supposed to move to the parish level until when it reaches us. Okay? So when we go to the sub-county level and get the totals of the sub-county level, we also get a meeting for validation. That is the second validation at sub-county level. And when we come to the district, there's what we call the exit meeting. And the exit meeting, that's when we gather all the technical people, and then we also validate at that third level. Okay? After all those validations, then it comes to the statistics office and we do the real business of the analysis. And after the analysis, we share with the districts up to the village level for what you have picked. Bennett, that's what I can talk about.
Yeah, excellent.
Okay.
You know, the reason I really wanted the Herbert to talk about that, because there was some, I think the population is not well informed about some of the data and evidence out there. There were many questions when this COVID relief fund was announced. How will they select the beneficiaries? For those that just joining the call, please, I'm just making sure that you know where we came from to have this. But as you can see, actually different, and from Mr. Onapa's first presentation, there are actually quite a lot of data and information out there. The challenge is many people really, in many cases, have never heard of this information. They do not know where it is, how it is accessed. I think that's a major challenge. So it was not true that there was no evidence that went into the decision for this initiative, as you had Mr. Onapa clearly state. But I think as a country, we really need to know, how do we have this data readily available to citizens, to scrutinize, to use? And at that point, would data like that Mr. Biondo has just explained, would it actually add value to a program like this 100,000 COVID relief being sent out there? Probably. But beyond data, what exactly can we do, or what else should be done to make sure that those that are the most vulnerable are also reached? Because even as Mr. Onapa clearly stated, even with all the evidence and the statistics they have, it's still not completely impossible to reach everyone or to identify everyone. And this is where I want to bring in Ms. Arana Kembabazi from the Initiative for Socioeconomic Rights, which is a think tank that actually focuses on citizens' rights, and they go to the ground, they do research and try to even go beyond basic statistics to try to identify vulnerabilities. Arana, I just wanted you to tell us, first of all, what you make of the government's 100,000 COVID relief, what your thoughts are in terms of how can the government potentially even reach more people with the support like this, and what the challenges are and how we need to go forward.
Thank you, Bernard, and it's been so great to listen. I think, first of all, thank you for convening this, because there's been a lot of back and forth in the public debate, and this is very needed. A couple of things. I'm so glad to hear that the panelists my co-panelists were frank in their limitations. And one thing stood out for me very comprehensively, which is this lack of coordination. And I keep underscoring that at a time when public trust is very low, when there are issues about how COVID-19 has been managed and COVID-19 funds, we must see a whole of government approach working rapidly to restore that trust, especially in issues of social protection and issues of money. So Uganda Bureau of Statistics will tell you about how they have data at the community.
Okay, I think Arana seems to be having connection issues, but she will rejoin again. Maybe we come back to our discussants again. Maybe if I may go back to Paul. Paul, if you are there, you are still there. There's several questions for you. Actually, I will keep picking up one by one. So there's one on data verification and how it was done, and how most of the people were disputing some of the data, some of the people on the list that were put up. Some people thought that could be because there wasn't enough verification done with the community, not necessarily through the data systems. Was there some sort of outreach poll ahead of the rollout of this initiative to the communities to prepare them for this?
Thank you very much, Bernard, and again, colleagues, for raising this. I've seen the questions in the chat. Quickly on data verification. Yes, we did make key attempts to verify the data before any payments were made. As I indicated earlier, that once the data has been first generated through the administrative records in the possession of the town clerk, this information was relayed back to the respective villages for purposes of uploading in public places. We required that this data be displayed. And the reason it was being displayed was, one, for verification, but also two, for update. The people who were doing this were the technical people, that is the CDOs, Community Development Officers, the ward administrators, our colleagues in the security, the ISO, community VHTs, okay, and in a number of instances, LCs. Now, the requirement was not that the LCs generate the data. No, it was the other way around, that LCs participate in the verification of the data. And we did this drawing from experiences of previous interventions. The moment you leave such processes to politicians, a lot of times you end up politicizing the process. That's why in this attempt, we're attempting to ensure that the process is as much as possible depoliticized and left to be technical as much as possible. So that was the verification at the community level. But also, we are not working alone. We are part of the National COVID-19 Task Force, which has ministers, which has permanent secretaries, and which has ministries, departments, and agencies, including people outside government, such as Red Cross. Now, all these teams went out, and all these have teams out. They did go out to verify that these things are happening. And I can confirm to you that indeed, this public transparency did happen. The ministers were there, and they have their own reports. Yes, there could have been challenges like any other targeting methodology. There will always be errors, okay? Either inclusion or exclusion errors. But the point is, how do you limit these to as much as possible to the minimum? And that is exactly what we are doing. We cannot confirm 100% to say that no, maybe there were no errors. No, there could have been errors in the list of people who got there. But our focus as a ministry, as the COVID-19 task force to whom we report to, is to reduce as much as possible the inclusion and exclusion errors to ensure that the beneficiaries are those that are intended, are those that we were directed to target, and are the ones that really should be receiving the funds. Thank you.
Excellent, Paul, as always. I think we have Arana back with us. Sorry, yeah. Arana, it's very understandable here. I also myself broke off in the beginning. Please carry on where you had just stopped.
Yes, and I like I said before that in a situation like this, where there's a lack of coordination, which has always been our issue, and also where the data is incomplete because of the fact that we didn't fully utilize the opportunity we had last year to double down, because I think we thought we have one lockdown and that's it. We should now recognize COVID is here to stay. We didn't really double down on it because last year we set up a single registry, as in we could have now really made a concerted effort to think through how we capture data of people who we know, because at this point, we have a sense of those who are vulnerable in lockdown, and we know that it is those who are in the informal sector. Right? So in what ISA proposed was like, people, let's be realistic. You don't have the complete data of the occupations, like you don't. It takes a while to get the community data and for it to be verified, which is very important, because what has been happening right now, and we got information, calls of people putting relatives and all kinds of people on these lists just to have the list and to send them. We got that information, first-hand information. So what we had proposed was, in this period, the data you have is data of people who are often in the formal sector. You have payee, you have NSSF. NSSF may be incomplete, but you tend to have more on the payee side. Basically, it's a universal approach. Get that data, exclude those of us that have been for example, just had pay remitted or is getting remitted this month, and in the last by the end of June, and then everyone else target and send. And there are two reasons for that. One, you don't have data, like I've said, so this approach is simpler and more credible. Two, the lockdown is really hitting everyone except those that, at least like me, who are able to get a monthly amount, whatever it is. You will argue that there are those who may still be able to earn, like women in markets, but we know that the demand has been down. We know that, for example, border riders can still take goods, but yesterday you had them. And if you've been watching what has been happening about people, yesterday I was watching on NTV about a woman boiling, not even vegetables. There were just all kinds of things just to confuse the children's stomach. It's a horrible situation right now. You'll argue that there are those in villages that have their land. And I think sometimes we need to recognize our privilege. When you talk about those in villages, you're thinking maybe of the West, where people tend to have a place they can till. I was in the East 2 years back, where you realize that people are they don't even have their own place. Like, they rent the place they're staying at, and they try to work in someone's garden to get 5K or whatever. And in a period like this where everyone is tightening resources, you're not going to be hiring people to work in your garden when you're all at home and you don't have money. Those people are left vulnerable. And this targeting is not including them, because in our heads we have romanticized this idea that in the villages there's land and there's food, and there is in some areas, but Uganda is not equal, and we need to recognize that. The other bit about why recognizing that, okay, if you decide to go ahead with a targeted approach, which, like I said before, we did not recommend, but if you did decide to do it, you had to involve the communities, and you had to particularly make sure that the lists are verified. When I hear, as you both say, they have this data at the community level, I'm like, that's nice. But even if you could not even use that data to figure out school and distribution of materials, then I don't know, that sort of whether we have gotten our data where we need to be. So in the meantime, I think in this period, there should have been that sort of working definitely with you both and gender and the community structures, and then making sure this is done transparently. That's why you saw in Namongona, people were up in arms and tore, and every single time you turn in the newspapers, there is a scandal about who is on the list. And when Parliament comes to you and says, give us the list, you say you cannot give you the national ID data. You can actually block out some figures of national ID. I think it's absolutely hypocritical to refuse to disclose on that basis for two reasons. One, our voter location registry things that you gave out, those voter location slips, they have our full national IDs. I picked up my dad's, and they left it with someone, a random person who said, hey, here is your father's voter location slip in January. So I think there's ways in which you can maintain the confidentiality of that and give those lists out. But beyond thinking through how that is done, and the issue of data is critical, not just for how you identify beneficiaries, but also how you determine the amount you're giving. You decide you're going to give 100,000. You come up with some calculation. I don't know what market prices you're using, because those are not current market prices. But you, boss, knows how much people spend on food. The data is there. And they will tell you it's at least 145. And when you add the electricity, the water, the things to cook, the other things, it becomes about 200, we took 200, 300, so we only talk to about 204,000. So if your boss already has that data, even when you're targeting food distribution, you should be able to use that data. Then you can then get into discussions of resources or whatever, but at least show us that you're making these decisions based on data. Because if you come up with 100,000 and when you are, and the amount you're putting of how much you spent more when you are buying from big suppliers. When government was buying on a large scale, it was spending more per kilo than some of the prices on that list. So I think it's very important that we're using data, both in how we target and in how we think through how much people should get. But I want to get to the broader issues, because I think we tend to think these are stopgap measures. They're not. This is about Uganda's social protection, and whether or not we actually prioritize it, whether we plan for it, whether we collect data for it, whether we coordinate. And the issue of coordination cannot be underscored enough. You decide you're going to use people with national IDs. NIRA has failed in its mandate, and I repeat, it has failed in its mandate to make sure that Ugandans can have national IDs without some sort of drama going behind to know someone, delays, and the errors. And the impact of that failure has been exclusion in social services. It's not just here, we're talking about social protection today, but IDA's research has found in health, in education, there has been exclusion, because as people begin to say, you need a national ID, and the same government has failed to deliver a national ID to all of its people, then there is exclusion. So the government should not even begin saying national ID. You first be able to deliver it to everyone. You can say if you have national ID, yes, but accept other forms of ID. And I was glad to see those discussions come up. Now, one of the things that needs to be done is for NERA to double down and recognize that if you are doing this system properly, even kids that are kids are born, they're getting ID, going through the life cycle, there's a synergy of this, because remember, social protection is supposed to be targeted throughout the life cycle, right? And beyond these cash transfers, old persons here, these fragmented programs, there are other things that can be done. So if we're getting serious about it, we need to get serious about synergy. We need to get serious about issues of exclusion raised by digital ID. We need to get serious about how we engage people. If we know we have structures, I remember there was a lot of drama. First, the LCs are going to be completely excluded. We are going to do it this way, but the LCs know the people, but then the LCs don't know the people. Then we're going to teach associations. So we need to have thought through these things, so that when a crisis comes, you're not thinking out loud. I need to have these discussions. I think you come with your proposals to the public and we input. Because what has been very troubling in this process, and for us, we've had to use social media to say this is how we will do it, is everything is being made top down and it's announced in the media. Then we all have the debates in the media, and then they go back, and there has to be a way where you can say, can you give proposals? There are a number of issues we are troubled about. For example, you say, okay, yes, we are targeting with a household approach. Okay, targeting with a household approach. But if it's the men that end up getting the money, can we always say it will benefit the family, it will trickle down, especially if it is done in a way that is not very transparent, and we've seen this, won't it spark even domestic violence? So there are other issues that you may not think of, because you may be coming at it from like a data perspective, you may be coming at it from, for us, we look at vulnerable people, or for us, we do this and operating in silos. And I think it's very important that there's a whole of government approach, but you're engaging civil society, you're engaging ordinary people, because they know who is vulnerable. They can be the ones that sound the alarm, that you create an opportunity for them to access a remedy. Right now, if I am in Namungo now or somewhere else, and I doubt these people, if I can even see the list, first of all. But let's say we go ahead with you boss's approach, and you've both said you put the list up, which hasn't been done properly. But if you say you do that, how do I get to communicate to you all that, listen, people have made up things in my community? Is it clear? Is there a toll-free line where I can say, last time there was a particular chairman who was asking every single person we put on the list, there has to be a kickback, you have to give me some money. So how do people report these? How do you involve them in monitoring? Because the monitoring is very important, and being able to report these issues is extremely important. So from and then getting back to the broader issues of social protection, you've done cash transfers. This can't be it. The teachers you're talking about have never received their money. We do not know why they have not received their money. The stories have changed over the years, over during the last year. We need to get this structure set up for them, and then now it's back to education. And then meanwhile, these people were out last time and they're out again. We are going to lose teachers. Literally, why would you want to be a teacher in this current environment? They can close schools at any point and you're just left hanging. Two, the continuity of the existing form of social protection must be underscored. You've noted that the people who get something, it's small, but you're saying it's something. Then make sure that bit, it's clear, it is continuing, and address the concerns we've had over the years with a lot of these programs, particularly SAGE. I has a whole report on that, so I won't get too much into that, but of issues of exclusion, of issues with data, and even the adequacy of the amount. Three, issues of when you give 100,000, you're addressing issues of rent, you're not addressing issues of electricity or of water, right? And there's been no moratorium that I've seen that says, you know what, in this period, you don't have to pay electricity, water, and there'll be no evictions based off rent. because you've locked people home. And Ugandans are not sitting there and saying, give us handouts. No, they would want to be out and do all these things, but now they are at home and they're under increasing pressure from this. So I think that we have to have a more holistic approach to social protection. We need to start thinking about social protection throughout the life cycle. And this issue of data particularly troubles me because in 2017, either UBOS, Ministry of Gender, Ministry of Health, sat and began to say, how do we identify criteria for the vulnerable? And recognized under gender's guidance that the vulnerable cannot be just people who are poor right now, as people traditionally think. That the vulnerability changes in the life cycle, right? We came up with draft criteria, we debated all of these things. The criteria never got finalized. I remember at the beginning of last lockdown, I said, people, there's a starting point for this. And maybe you will go ahead and give out the food. But if this happens again, at least we'll have something, right? And when I saw the World Bank had given money towards a single registry and was starting to be up, I went there, I said, this is good. You know, maybe we will not be in emergency response. But now a year later, we are still in emergency response. We need to get serious because they're now telling us there's so many variants. And if you've seen other countries, they open, close. Here, maybe you close here, maybe you close the city, you know? So we cannot continue to have the same discussions of thinking vulnerability in a lockdown is only in the city. It's not. 2, we don't have data. 3, we now have a single registry. I heard Gender talking about maybe we need some other thing. No, the problem with Uganda is we have too many things. We need to consolidate them. Let the single registry be the home. Work with UBOS because UBOS is supposed to be the home of our data. It doesn't help KCCA has its data, UBOS, Gender will now here. Health will also have its own data for national health insurance on how to identify the indigent. There has to be some synergy because Ugandans have to feel in a situation where the trust has been so eroded, data plays a critical role. And I like the focus on not just having quantitative data, but qualitative data and making sure that there are feedback mechanisms, making sure that there's monitoring, making sure that there's community participation, and really looking into those systematic issues of exclusion, particularly with national ID. If you continue to require national ID, you should be on notice. ISA will go ahead and sue. We did this for vaccines. We've documented this and we already have a case pertaining to health, and we continue to monitor this situation because we firmly believe that in a situation where the state has failed to ensure that there's an ID, which is an important thing for people, they cannot then require it to exclude others. The last, and I guess the very last thing is to think through the modalities of how the money is distributed. We were against giving cash by hand just because of all of the corruption and all of the things that have happened. With mobile money, I think you've hinted at the issues there where people don't have the mobile money numbers in their names. They don't have, you know, there are real issues there. So you have to tread with this carefully. For me, with mobile money, I'm also question what is the administrative cost? The thing that I see government has been quiet about is administrative costs. So if you're using post bank, we're using, what is the administrative cost? Because we live in a time where we don't have unlimited resources. We must make sure we're doing things in a very cost efficient way. Part of why you are against food, and I completely agree with you, food distribution was a mess. Even there's a case on that. But I think we need to look at the administrative costs of this. And I know that someone will be speaking about using big data. And I want to just flag that for me, the main limitation there is in a society like ours, where people lack IDs, there's a huge informal sector, you're clearing a lot of money on your mobile money account. It's not always there. I could be someone who is coordinating, you know, a building site, and a lot of money is clearing, right? So that's why I think there's a lot of discussion about why that cannot work. And those are discussions we should continue to think about. And when we think about big data, Uganda's main concern was the privacy of my information, right? How do you safeguard it? What do you mean these people know how much, you know, and like they knew, but like now you're giving it to government, like what are, so there's issues there as well with data protection that I hope will be interrogated, particularly with the next speaker. I think that I'm so glad we're talking about data in a way that can be used to shape and change people's lives, especially the most vulnerable. But we must also pay attention to the limitations of the data we have, issues of privacy, and just making sure that we must remember in everything we are doing, we are working for real people. People like the woman yesterday that I saw that have no food for their kids. And a whole of government approach, real emphasis on this is really important.
Excellent. Excellent, Helen. I think you speak for a lot of people I can see in the chat as well, people agreeing with what you're saying. I think really the crux of what you are saying, Paul did acknowledge that the system they are using is not by any means perfect, but I will give Paul another chance to especially point out some of the other issues you raised, like was there some non-data dynamics that they may have followed? Like, did they look at the gender dynamic, disability? There is a question on disability that has appeared like several times. Was there a special consideration for persons with disability?
Yes, it is true that vulnerability is multi-layered, okay? And clearly she has indicated. But also to notice the multi-layered nature of vulnerability, these women that we're talking about, for example, single mothers, they converge at a certain occupation, okay? There's a category, true, that is not doing anything. But at some point, the multi-layerness converges at a certain level of occupation. And that is where we target them from. I'll give an example, okay? It is true, certain occupations are predominantly male, others are predominantly female. So with the targeting, yes, largely borders will be male, okay? And the data is there. But to the contrary, when we look at the private teachers, okay, the teachers in private schools, 27,048 are female, compared to only 12,000 who are male. Now, who are these women? Some of these are the single mothers, are these women that you're talking about, okay, who are fending for their families and etc. I'll give another example. Street vendors. Street vendors, from my data here, out of the 31,000 that were so far entered, on the street vendors alone, only 12,000 are male, 12,214 are male, 19,672 are female, okay? So in a way, yes, we appreciate the multi-layered nature of vulnerability, but also note that it converges at some point of occupation. And we take note that in some areas where we know, even in Kampala, this is very visible, that most of the street vendors are actually women. And that is how the data gets to speak to that. Another example, if I may give you, the waitresses. By the nature of the word, waitresses, majority tend to be women. And here we have only 2,497 are men, 7,383 are female, okay? I'm just bringing this data to just demonstrate that there is disaggregation by occupation, and indeed some predominantly female and some predominantly male. That is the first. The second is on the dynamics. I've seen a question on disability, elder persons. Two things to note. One, the cash transfer of 100,000 does not replace existing government interventions to capture these people. As I noted, the focus was on people who depend on daily earning, in which case it tends to shift us away from the traditional known categories of the vulnerable, the elderly, the person with disabilities, the women, etc. However, if it so happens that that person with disability, for example, is a street vendor, they are captured. If that person with disability, okay, is maybe operating in a salon or in a washing bay, they are captured by fact of that daily earning. But they will not be captured by just mere being that your person living with disability. Why? Because all the interventions are ongoing. We have stepped up the disability grant to reach out to the person with disability. We have stepped up the social assistance grants for empowerment, reach out to the older persons, and have also stepped up interventions under the GBV docket through the shelters, okay, to reach out to those. We have stepped up our interventions on the street children, okay, and those in destitute homes. And all we do this is because we want these interventions to go on, and the cash is simply a complement. Then the other second one, which Alana talked about, is administration costs. There's nothing to hide about administration costs. These are known. Per transaction, okay? Per transaction, it is 3,425 per transaction for 100,000. And the breakdown is 1,000 is the fees charged by Postbank. Then 1,925 are the charges by the telecoms, Airtel and MTN. They have harmonized their rates, and 500 is the tax. Okay, so for every 100,000, we are incurring 3,425. Very much on the lower side, honestly. But if you want the overall admin budget, out of the 54 billion, 51.3 is actually into the direct beneficiaries, the 501,107, and only 3 billion is what has been provided for the admin costs. So clearly,
could the admin costs be lower, in your opinion?
No.
Like your frank opinion, could the admin costs be lower?
To be lower in terms of,
Yes,
because
you're still losing billions in admin costs.
No, why? You know why? Because cabinet directed that the bank charges must be met by government. Now, when the bank charges are met by government, if you compute the beneficiaries, the 501,107 times the 3,425, it comes to 1.7 billion. Okay? Now,
but there are measures that could have been taken to reduce the admin costs, and that's what I'm trying to understand. Like how? Because I know government is taking them over. There are a couple of things that you could, for example, when you say that telecoms got together and they gave you that rate, right? Was there a pushback? I mean, your government, we're in a crisis.
No, but this is from
an engagement. There's a lot of emphasis on that in the discussions, because I do appreciate that government want to make sure that at least, because the money is so little, that they were not going to, in terms of what it does in 6 weeks or wherever, right? But they were trying to make sure Ugandans are not shouldered with them. But when government money it's still our money, it's still taxpayers' money. It could be money that could go towards more people, right? So I think as you continue to think of your program, I know you're still modifying it. Interrogate what more could be done in terms of lowering the admin costs. And Isa has some ideas. We'll be happy to engage on that.
Perfect. We'll be happy to engage with you, and you give us some ideas of how we can get this down. I believe we'll
maybe
be able to.
Paul, if you could also say, how did the fact that this was an emergency, how did it affect your processing? That could have been a factor also, that this was very, very big emergency, needed very quickly, so you couldn't go through all the other stages in an ideal scenario that had it been different.
It's true that there could have been time lags, but also that cannot be an excuse, because engagement with the telcos and other providers has been ongoing, and there are concessions that have been actually given. I will tell you, for example, for a mere fact, that the telcos waived some costs on withdrawal of mobile money, and that's to all Ugandans. And that data is there, you can verify. So what is being put here is a minimal charge. Even all of us here do send mobile money. Okay, you realize that there has been some concession. That's number one. The other second one is we entered into an agreement that no loan deductions shall be made on these funds, because telecoms run these loan things, okay, which Airtel and mobile money and MTN have. So they did agree that no transactions in terms of loan recoveries will actually be made for this period, so that the monies that are received by the beneficiaries are intact. 100,000 to serve the purpose that has been made. But as Isa has said, we'll be very glad to learn of how we can even get this down, because at least we have really tried to get this as much as possible down. But also, Paul, to note,
if you're withdrawing money, so withdrawal fees have been waived by the telecoms, right?
Not waived.
They haven't been waived.
They haven't been waived, but
government paying.
Yes, government is paying.
Why?
So no, because you see, there are two ways.
In a pandemic, why?
No, there are two ways. The first option was, let's give people 100,000 and they meet their withdrawal charges, in which case we'd reduce the amount to about 900 and blah, blah, blah. The president directed and said, no, let Ugandans get the value of 100,000. So that means that in the amount of money that we send, as you can see, it is, you have received 100,000, okay, 102,425. You see that?
And I get that, but the government is, the telecoms are making a killing of this. The government is using taxpayers.
Okay,
that's literally enable people to profit. We're in a pandemic. Last year They waived a lot of these things, even sending charges, right?
Alana,
so why can't government in this negotiation
Alana,
come and say people no?
Alana, that's another debate.
Just say we're not using you, then we think through other things, because it's a lot of money we're paying.
That's another debate that we can engage with the telecos in terms of private sector, public-private partnerships. It's another debate that we can engage to see how to address things in the pandemic.
And it's not in public-private partnership. It's about like you're all in a pandemic. They came last year, all giving, and last year they did it, and other countries they've done that. Because I'm very disturbed by the fact that taxpayers that are going to be funding shareholder profits in these companies. And if that's the case, then there are more reasons to tell us. Anyway. That's a different
I guess, Alana, we could also, it's been actually the debate around the world, how private entities have basically been making a killing in the pandemic. It's not just here, but unfortunately, private companies don't lose. They see an opportunity everywhere. But I think, Paul, maybe let's first go to our last speaker. We'll bring back the discussion for the next 20 or so minutes that are left.
But we'll broad issues, if you allow me, that yes, Alana raised yes. that I think I just want to shed more light on.
Please go ahead.
Yes, the first was, I don't know whether Alana was meaning that government should either pay rent or electricity for the people, but ideally, the government recognizes that needs are beyond cash, are beyond food, but also move to those other needs, rent, electricity, etc. And as you can see through the central bank, the Governor Bank of Uganda did write to commercial banks, okay, to waive or at least postpone or defer loan recoveries. And that is a measure. I mean, government will not pay the loans, but rather those. You have also seen engagements with the landlords in terms of rent payments. So I wanted that to be taken note that
not just engagement, there should be moratoria. Like it comes and you say you cannot be evicted during this period. Or the way you say water, because I've seen water guys come, they no longer say they're disconnecting. They say we brought the bill and they disconnect you. People, put moratoria, because there's some of us who know what's going on and can engage, but otherwise you're leaving it to the landlord's goodwill. At the same time, you've locked someone in their house. You're only giving them if they are lucky to get any money at all. I think it's not fair. And other countries have done that. In the States, it was done so much that they even took government to court over this moratoria, and the court upheld that yes, the moratoria were okay because it is a period of crisis. So it can't be these engagements. Sometimes we need things on paper.
Yeah, the paper is there. Alana, the paper is there. You have seen a communication from Governor Bank of Uganda. At least I knew you have seen.
Yeah, I'm talking specifically on rent, the day-to-day, where I stay, the roof over my head, water, electricity. And you say for this period, and you did this before, but you say it clearly, for this period, no.
Now,
because you lock us up without any notice, 42 days. Some people even had their money locked in Chuku, like 42 days, bam. So
no, let me note this. Let me note this, that the COVID-19 National Task Force did take note of these concerns, raised them to cabinet, and that is why cabinet engaged those service providers with a view to do exactly that. Okay, I'll not say Minister of Gender has a mandate to order national water not to evict or not to cut off water. No, but cabinet did take note, and those are actions that are being done within the context of the available frameworks. Because you're not going to say, okay, don't disconnect Yaka. Yaka is very simple. You either put the credit or not if it disconnects itself. So some things must be taken in the context of what is available and what is possible. Then the other second one, let me just finish on the grievance handling. Alana, there is a grievance handling mechanism, very, very clear, and the people are aware. And we have told them, in case you have any grievances, either in the context of exclusion, or you have been included in error, which most people don't do, or you have anything about the operation of the program, right from the local level, the Office of the Resident District Commission has been designated as the grievance handling point. Okay, the villages know their contacts, and at the center, the RDCs link up with us. In Kampala, the RCCs, they link up with us for those grievances that they cannot handle. And what are grievances? What grievances have we been receiving? Grievances are about, oh, the people that have been put here maybe don't belong to this village, and that we sort out. Oh, we have received money, but blah, blah, blah. Now, those are the grievances that are being handled. We've not had grievances which are so complex for the RDCs to handle. And that's why you have seen in Nakawa, the resident city commissioner in some villages actually ordered for the process to be started afresh. So there's a clear grievance handling mechanism and procedure that the people know. And our communications teams have been engaging the communities and population for them to understand the methods and approaches through which they can raise their grievances. We're really, really open to learning, we're open to listening, and we're open to engaging the public and communities on this. Thank you.
Excellent, Paul. Thank you so much. Paul, take a minute, please, to once again, you may have hinted on it in the beginning, but can you specifically address his issue of that micro-targeting for persons with disability?
Thank you very much, Bennett, and thank you, David, for raising this. Like I noted, we're using occupational targeting. When we get to an occupation, okay, then we drill down. It is true that some occupations will not have persons with disabilities. That's a fact. But it's also true that I know, and I will tell you in the data that we have, some of the vendors that have been captured are persons with disabilities, because that's where they are, especially in Kampala. That's where they are. So our system, the data, is able to drill down, looking at beneficiaries by gender, beneficiaries by age, and beneficiaries at least by personal disability. So I'm happy to drill this data for you and share it with you. But at least I know that there are personal disabilities who are benefiting. They may not be to the level that you so want or that would have been desired because of the targeting methodology, but they are there. But also, as I said, let's not think that the 100,000 will sort out all the problems of all the vulnerable categories. No, this is a survival transfer, and all the other interventions of government are continuing. It's not correct, David, to say that disability grant is not working. No, that's not true, because I work for the ministry and I see the disability grant really being disbursed. Okay, we can share with the list of beneficiaries. You're free to go and cross-check with them and see that they're receiving. Money at this time is money. Okay, irrespective of the source, whether it's from the disability grant, whether it's from the 100,000 grant, it is to smooth consumption and enable the household to survive. Thank you.
Excellent. I think for the benefit of all the participants, Paul will share with me some of the materials and the data he has, including his presentation today. So don't worry about that. You can reach out to me later and I will get to you those materials. But I now want to take the next 10 minutes to talk about really the wider discussion on the role of what we are calling big data. You heard Paul keep referring to, they went to telecom companies to get data. They went to private businesses to get data, KCCA databases to get data. But what is this? What does this mean within the wider scheme of our national statistical system? What challenges will big data pose in the future in terms of privacy? I already saw comments in the chat talking about the privacy issue. If you can move to a company and get a data set on its clients, does that not jeopardize their privacy? But again, it looks like increasingly this is becoming a very important source of data for governments and other policymakers worldwide. I just want to ask you, Brody, to take a few minutes, explain to us the dynamics of how technology is changing the traditional nature of statistics and what big data can do to strengthen the evidence pool that is available to the government of Uganda in the future targeting of social interventions. Wilbrod, I want you to get the rights to just speak for 10 minutes. I don't know if you have a presentation or something. Are you there, Wilbrod?
Hi, Bernard. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Go ahead.
All right. I have only 10 minutes to discuss something so technical and how it maybe can help us innovate in the ways we deliver services, but also how we see data and how we can innovate around data collection, data use, and data sharing, and also targeting several categories of people. So for bandwidth, I'm going to turn off the video. Have something to present that will help me explain what you can see my screen now.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so we may have discussed big data and social interventions, and our basically touch on data and what big data, what we consider to be big data, and what cell phones have brought, and how they have been useful in terms of big data and benefits in terms of being able to have such a powerful gadgets in our hands. And also what next? So I'll try and explain some of those. One, like Ben said, I'm a data scientist at NSSF, and we use data a lot in our processes to handle automations, to do advanced analytics, but also to have seamless touch points for our customers. So you're able to access our services wherever you are. Now comes the COVID-19 pandemic. It has forced us to innovate. You find beyond working from home and all these things, we have to find ways to innovate in nearly all angles, including the way we target people and the way we target development, especially local level development. So yes, we have UBOS, and Mr. Beyond touched on some of the traditional data sources, but we're having challenges with the traditional data sources. From what Arena and colleagues were complaining about, you can find that it's hard to use traditional data sources that are not so mature to target different categories of people, especially if you want to disaggregate that level that you want to pick a tax driver and leave out the tax owner. Taxi, those are our local minibuses. Okay. So what is the situation of data now? I mean, and what do we see as data? One, I'll use this image designed by Development Initiatives, by Mr. Bill Anderson. You'll find that we have registers and administrative systems, and majority of our systems in Uganda, we have issues to do with interoperability, but also with the quality in the different systems. So if you find there are no local level management information systems, and the systems available can't communicate with each other, we are trying our level best with the current national, the NIN system, the ID system, to map it all across other touch points. But still it's challenging to add in other variables that will help you identify the people you're trying to target. So this is the traditional, basically the traditional data sources. So you move from the micro data or where you have people or other objects you're observing, and you collect that data through survey, censuses, and blah, blah. I don't want to go into the technicalities, okay, because of time. So with the COVID situation, we are targeting that category of people in town who are not well recorded, whose information is scattered everywhere. And we know that most of these people, even the occupations, are not recorded anywhere. So it must be a big challenge for the ministry to try to target them, and target them 100% efficiently. And that's where we need to actually appreciate them for trying to innovate around this. So if you're targeting that person sitting in that office, you're so disconnected from that person. So you need to find a way to reach them, and at a low cost, and that there will be ability to follow the cash, and maybe accountability, and so have majority of the cash reach them, or the benefits reach them. And so that calls for innovation. And one of the areas you could consider or discover or want to play along with is the fact that devices are all over now, and we are seeing more innovations in big data. But also, we know, especially economists know, that if you give someone cash, it's much better than giving them, say, a specific item like posho, because with cash they are able to, to spend it the way they like. If it's 100K and I don't want posho, maybe I want to start a chapat stand, it becomes easier for such a person. So that's kind of an innovation to bring in cash. But so now, where does big data come in, and how do you deliver cash efficiently? Because with cash we have challenges with moving it and being able to distribute it, so it becomes hard, and that's where you have to innovate around certain technologies. So that brings me to big data, and it's mostly a byproduct. So you don't intend to produce it. A few organizations are putting huge investments to produce it. Majority of companies are not, because it's expensive to generate those systems. It's also expensive to build and maintain them. But for other things that are built and are not necessarily targeting to produce big data, they end up producing big data. So for example, the phone companies, when they are trying to, to operate and then they innovate the mobile money, and then they find mobile money can actually be used for this and that and that. Then you discover later that actually if you touch a little more and add a little more indicators, then you'll find that that byproduct can be used and be efficient again from it. So because we have traditionally known big data to have lots of data and coming in from regularly, it can make it real time, and which is in different formats and different forms. We touched about vulnerability issues. There are so many other V's up to 40 and above, but we are not going to have time to discuss them. But the general idea is that big data is bad data, because it's not standardized. It's not the intention, being a byproduct, that the intention is not to produce data. The intention is to produce a service or a certain gadget. So it's now that we need to actually focus more on trying to find ways we can harness it and ways we can make it better. Because at the moment, if they give a big data set, you're going to suffer with it. One, because of the technology, because of the capacity that few people are trained, who can handle millions or billions of records coming in, nearly every micro, whatever second. So we need to seriously take a step and find ways we can harness such data. Okay. My time is almost done, but I don't know whether Bernard can give me a few more minutes to...
Yeah, you can take 5 more minutes, Wilbrod, but try to wrap up. Take more 5 as we head to a conclusion. That's fine.
All right. Thank you. So the good, when these things came, we had a lot of technologies interested in them, but only it's now that we are trying to understand them. And for those who understand that, it follows the Dunning-Kruger effect. First, we thought we knew it, but it's now that we're actually trying to get the benefits. And it's now that we should be able to push companies and startups that are trying to do well. Some of these are like Wekebere, which is helping pregnant women with devices to monitor babies until delivery, thereby reducing, challenges there. There's global auto systems, which are collecting health data and producing digital electronics and robotics. Pulse Lab can use them, and of course the fund. So it's not a cell phone, it's actually mobile money. That's where the innovation is. And the potential benefits is that you have better controls. You can audit the cash that was distributed if you want to, because you know how much was given to which number. If you're saying you're registering 100 people, one number, it becomes hard to, it's easier to identify those outliers. So it's easier to, it's better to have all of the money reach the beneficiaries than if you try to do it the traditional way, where it may disappear along the way. Two is you can do data analytics. So with more information collected, or information that is stored now, you can purposely, I don't know whether Paul is doing this, you can purposely ask, rating more information on who received the money and where they the potential people to receive it. And then you can actually present data and say, we know for sure some people are disabled to receive this money. We know that some people who were missed out, and so we need to fill in these gaps. And such a database of these vulnerable people in that category can actually be very helpful to other people who are targeting such categories, because then they gain confidence that actually the money is going to reach the intended beneficiaries, and that money is going to help them. It's going to help them buy the small things they need. It's going to help the small businesses, get some cash from these other people, not a big corporation supplying everyone. So it's very beneficial that where we have started, we don't stop there. We actually build on it. We build on being able to target certain people using that database that we may have created at the moment. That's the Ministry of Gender, because it's actually a big resource. Because we don't want you to now also target people and forget that there is actually a data component that you can build on and lead to better livelihoods for those people. So I'll conclude. One, we need to discover more on big data and other sources of information, and we need to purpose to collect data when we have interventions. Most of these interventions, I remember the supplying portion, they wrote numbers and names, but I don't think they were digitized, and I don't think there's somewhere where you can do a follow-up and say, we need to give these people more. And so when we discover all these things, then we can innovate, build the right digital infrastructures, and also we can help policymakers be able to, to target the people they are willing to target. We also need to find a way to make data communicate within the different systems that we have, and beyond that, we need to be able to do analytics. And I hope Gender can do that. If they can't, they can hire my services, a small fee. We also need to make sure that policymakers understand big data and artificial intelligence in basic terms, so that they can actually put more investments to produce goods that we'll use for the future. Right now, we are focusing on goods for the past. We need to focus on producing for the future, and that's where we can get, a competitive advantage. So again, we need to strengthen open data and data communities. Majority of data in these systems is not made open because people are worried we will identify people. With developments in data anonymization, this data can actually be shared, and it does no harm, and people and it has no impact in terms of individual or institutional privacy. I think we need to encourage more our national bodies to share data, and we need to build more data communities locally. Beyond the national level, we need to find a way to build more data communities and find ways to support them. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Wilbrod, our data scientist from the National Social Security Fund, and also an independent open big data expert. Those were really, now you can see that there is some background, there is some sort of technical scientific area on which the Ministry of Gender based some of their decisions. So the big data is a field that is increasingly being used. And someone said, can we get recommendations from this meeting? Obviously, people have been posting great ideas in the chat. We are going to aggregate them later and we will share right up with all of you summarizing the outcomes. But we've run out of time, but I want us to take 5 more minutes to just wrap this up and get 1 or 2 more other comments. Maybe Herbert from UBOS, are you still with us? I wanted to give you the last word because I know, again, maybe an indication that UBOS needs to publicize more of the work that you do. I know beyond the surveys, there are other data collection mechanisms that you have. UBOS also is transitioning, it's adopting technology as well, and it has some open data portals and some data systems as well. Maybe, Herbert, if I can just give you the last word, just very briefly, in terms of how UBOS has also been using innovation and trying to actually make sure that they don't have to wait for a 5-year survey. There is data in between surveys. I think there is something that you already do about that.
Thank you, Leonard. Yeah, we have a number of innovations, but also with the collaboration with other stakeholders. One of them is the big data. I'm glad the doctor from OKM has really elaborated on how best we are trying to see how the data collected by other stakeholders can be made official. And we are moving very fast on that. Some of our colleagues have been sponsored to go and train that field. There is also the innovation of this community information system, okay? That is going to help us to move away from census rather surveys, regular surveys. So there'll be a time when, a period in time when a census is, rather a survey is conducted to validate this daily, weekly, monthly, or annual data that's being collected. There is a way that can do that for cross-checking and also finding the validity. There are other also innovations like the era of questionnaires. The era of questionnaires in UBOS is fading out. We are adopting this CAPI application, and it has helped us to save a lot, especially on the printing of questionnaires, data capture, okay? And also the tabulation. Because when you are using this one, you can just make your tabulation plan, and the data just comes and fits into that table straight away. So it has reduced on a lot of expenses on data collection. The science we are coming up with is embedded with all those new innovations. And we are also planning to take on the big data. How are we incorporating it under our normal community information system? Thank you.
Excellent, excellent as always. This has really been fascinating. I really want to thank each and every one of you. Paul, maybe do you have some parting shot? You've really been resourceful, Paul. I think you can see most of the fire was directed to you, but I'm sure you were happy also to give your side, because I think many people really didn't know a lot about what the ministry was doing.
Yeah, and again, in light of that, I want to thank you, Bennett, and the DI team, and all my colleagues, the panelists, and everybody who's online for sharing those experiences. One, they help us to learn, but they also help us to share with you what we're doing. I'll be very happy, as I promised to you, to share with you the disaggregated data, the statistics and a bit of the computations behind this and the reports for further information. Then you'll be able to share with others. So I want to thank you very much for organizing this.
Thank you, Paul, and extend our appreciation to the Permanent Secretary, Mr. Agre Kibenge, who was really keen to see that the ministry participates in this conversation. And of course, our citizen representative, Alana, the foot soldiers of all this, who make sure that they keep our feet on the fire to remember all the time that there are real people behind these numbers. Alana, you are parting short, and then we close this up.
Thank you, Bernard. Like you say, people are behind this, people are dropping dead. Even yesterday, we were learning about this. But I want to thank the government, first of all. I know I haven't thanked them at all, for doing the cash transfer. I think it's so much better. ISA believes it's so much better than prior ways. It enables people to be able to buy what they need and maintain some form of dignity. I think there's a lot more that can be done, definitely around data, around making sure we're not wasting taxpayers' money, administrative fees, around just participation and legitimacy. I think if this program is done right, it can begin to rebuild public trust, and we really, really need it. And as civil society, we continue to work with government. I know someone said if I was in that position, I would be doing that. But I think when we've actually worked and we've done that over the years, particularly the issue of identifying the vulnerable, we've recognized the limitations. I think for me, the challenge is sometimes government has all of the things scattered. And I think the office of the Prime Minister in particular, it's supposed to whip up government to make sure you're not working in silos, right? And you have authority that I don't think you utilize fully. So I think this is the time to really bring together closer Ministry of Gender and WIBOS, like we have been pushing for a really long time, to get serious on the question of data, and NIRA, because you're using it to exclude so many. And of course, issues like the National Planning Authority, the Ministry of Health. I mean, really, it should be a whole of government approach. So we hope we see that. We have publications out on different issues, including one on cash transfers and what our approach would be. They're on our website. I posted, I think, the cash transfer one. And we remain as a resource if you want to reach us to report any violations that are happening. We do work across different programs, litigation, monitoring, advocacy, research, just to make sure that citizens are constantly able to have their voices heard. Thank you again. DI, as always, DI has a great database if you haven't seen it, so you should definitely interrogate. They try to put together data and make fun chats, and sometimes when I'm bored, I spend some time there as well. It's a fun place. And I heard that Bernard said they're going to be doing more things, so I hope it's something, because I think as citizens, the most important thing is to be aware, because if we're vigilant and we're aware, then we're making sure that the development is actually working for us. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, of course, what she's talking about is our spotlight on Uganda data portal, which has disaggregated and visualized data on by district. So thank you so much. Remember, you can keep on the conversation on our website. I think my colleague James from our comms department has shared the details in the chat on our website, on our social media sites. Please keep this conversation going. As I said, if you shared your contacts with us, someone will be getting back to you for admin issues. And you can still send me an email. It's all in the chat and on some of your emails. This really has been very, very rich, and we will share a summary of outcomes a little later. But I really want to thank you so very much. And on this note, we would like to end the discussion and hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.